Hey guys, this is Zero from the Wholesome team, and I wanted to make a video to show you how to create a plugin from scratch. I'm seeing a lot of questions on the forums on how to do this, how to do that, and I feel like oftentimes the answer is a plugin, but it seems like not a lot of people know how to make a plugin, especially from scratch. So this is what this video is for. It's going to be very beginner friendly. So if you already have experience with creating that type of stuff, then you're probably not interested. Other than that, I hope you enjoy. So before we get started, we need a few things. Obviously, you need a World of Warcraft client as well as wRobot installed on your computer with a license key. But you also need Visual Studio, and you can find the community version on their website for free. With that, you will need also a .NET framework, but I'm pretty sure when you download and use wRobot, you need .NET framework anyway by default. So if you don't have it, if you're not sure, you can still download .NET framework version 4.7.2. We will get back to it. So if you have everything now, we can start and create the Visual Studio project, which is a solution. So I'm going to open Visual Studio. And you're greeted with this window. And what we want to do is create a new project. Now this is important because if you select the wrong project template, it could be problematic. So what you're going to do is in this search bar here, you're going to type frame. Because we are looking for .NET framework, right? And what we want is the one called class library.NET framework, a project for creating a C# class library. This is what you use to create file classes, plugins, and even products for that matter. So I'm selecting this, pressing next, and I'm going to give the project a name. I'm going to call it plugin tutorial. As for the location, as you can see, it kept my last setting, so that's good. This is where I want to create it. And as you can see, you have to select the framework, right? This is what I was talking about. There's multiple versions that I have on my computer currently, and the one I'm at least 100% sure works with wRobot is 4.7.2. So I advise you take this one, but I think any higher version than this one will work. It's perfectly fine. I think even 4.6 will work, but in doubt, go for this one. And if you don't have it in this list, you will have to download it, right? And restart the project creation. And I'm going to create the project now. Okay, so now that the project is created, what we want to do is, before we start even coding, we want to set up the project nicely, right? So the first thing, the most obvious one, is to rename this class, because class 1 is not a name we want, obviously. So I'm going to right click on class1.cs here, rename, and we're going to name it main.cs. Press yes. So it also renames not only the file but also the class. And that's done. And the next thing we want to do is to add the wRobot references that we will need during the development process. Because when you start a project from scratch, you only have the default references. So right click on reference, add a reference, and now we're going to browse. Now what you want to do is go to your wRobot installation folder. And there's a bin folder in there. This is where you want to go. And we're going to select Memory Robot, Robot Manager. I'm control clicking right now. It's control click to select multiple. files. So memory robot, robot manager, and W manager. You might need more in the future, but for now it should be more than enough. Then you click add and you click OK. And as you can see now, they appear in the list of references. After that, what you want to do is to right-click on PluginTutorial here on the project, click Properties. Here you can see the target framework, the assembly name. You can leave that all by default, but you need to go in Build here. Here there's any CPU. I need to click on x86 because otherwise I get a warning. It's really not a big deal, but I like it when there's no warning when you build. And then you need to define the output path, right? And what we want to do is when we build, we want the file to be sent directly into our wRobot plugins folder. So that's what we want to select. So I'm going to click Browse, and I'm going to go to my wRobot folder, plugins, select, and there you go. Now if we build the file, it's going to be sent directly to the plugins folder, so we don't have to copy and paste it every time. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to show you what happens when you build as is. So I'm going to show you my plugins folder. That's the one. It's my wRobot plugins folder. I have a few plugins here, okay. So if I build now, press build, it created a tons of files, right? We see PluginTutorial.dll, so that's good, that's what we want. But the rest, there's a lot of unwanted stuff. The reason is because when we added the references, the wRobot references just before, by default, Visual Studio, when it builds, also copies the references into the output path. So we don't want that. So first I'm gonna clean up all these files. So there's the one. And as you can see, that's 9 files that have been added. So you might think, oh, it's not a big deal. I don't care if they're there. The problem is if you leave them there, is that when you launch wRobot, I'm going to show you. These files will appear like they were plugins, which makes, this interface really confusing. So we don't want that, obviously. So I'm closing wRobot now, and I'm gonna delete these files. Okay, we have PluginTutorial. I'm gonna delete that too. And the PDB files is you can leave. This one is not a problem. I'm gonna delete it too, but you will see that it will come back, but we don't care about this one. Okay, so what we want to do is to go in reference, memory robot, and you see here there's a property called copy local, and we want to set it to false. Same for robot manager, false, and W manager, false. And now that we've done that, what we want to do is to go in File and save all, or Control-Shift-S. Now, that's the plugin folder, right? Now if we build, it only added PluginTutorial.dll and PluginTutorial.pdb, so that's good. That's what we want. Okay, so now the project is set up nicely, and we can start coding. So what we can do is go in main.cs, and the first thing we need to do is to make sure that the main class inherits from, or implements, should I say, the I plugin interface. And as you can see, it proposes wmanager.plugin. That's what we want. So we click on that. It added the reference. And now we can see that it's complaining that we are not implementing the interface. So very easily, you can click on Show Potential Fixes and Implement Interface. Okay, so this means this interface requires main to have three methods: dispose, initialize, and settings. We're gonna set it in the right order I prefer it. So initialize executes when the product or wRobot start, when you press play, basically. Dispose execute when you press stop, and settings execute when you press the settings button in the plugins tab. Okay, so now we're gonna remove these rows. And maybe what we want to do for now is just write a message in the log when we start the plugin. So let's do that. So logging dot write, and we're gonna say plugin tutorial initialized. Okay, now we can rebuild. Good. Now I'm going to wRobot. I'm gonna go to the plugin tab here, make sure plugin tutorial.dll is turned on. Go back to the log, and let's see what happens when we press play. Hopefully we're gonna see the message. Spoiler, we won't. And there you go, it says, so I'm gonna stop it. It says error to load plugin. And it doesn't give you much information, right? And this is the kind of roadblock that people, get stuck on, and which is understandable because what is going on here? So the reason here it's not working is because the main class, the entry point of the plugin, cannot be in a namespace other than the wRobot one. So you can simply remove the namespace here. There you go. We're gonna retry. So the great thing, by the way, about developing a file class or a plugin is that you don't need to close wRobot entirely, to close the window entirely and restart it. You can just press stop, rebuild, play, and your plugin will be up to date. So that's very convenient when developing. So we just build. Now we can go to wRobot. I'm going to clear the log. I'm going to press play again. And I forgot to rebuild, didn't I? So build, wRobot, clear the log, press play, and there you go, plugin tutorial initialized. Okay, so now we know that the plugin works with wRobot. That's great. So I'm gonna copy, just for convenience, this message in dispose and say plugin tutorial disposed. All right. Now we can start actually coding the plugin. So there are generally I would say two ways to do this, or a mix of the two. It's either a loop that's constantly iterating during the session, or a plugin that reacts to events. And we're going to talk about these two cases, right? So I'm going to start with the loop. So what we want now is when we initialize, we want to start a loop. And when we dispose, we want to stop the loop. So the first thing I want to do is to create a class variable called private bool is running. Okay, so by default it's going to be false. And we want to make sure when we initialize is running C, look at that, it's auto-completing. That's great. Can you do that again? Can you? You can. It's magic. Look at that. Okay, so when we initialize, isRunning is turned to true. When we dispose, isRunning is turned to false. So we want to create a method that's going to be the loop, right? So let's do that. Private void, and let's call it plugin loop. You can call it whatever you want, really. Okay. And now we want obviously to have a loop inside, a while loop inside, but that's a controlled while loop. So let's do that. While, so we want to check if is running is true, right? So when we press stop, this while loop stops too. Next, what we want to do is to check if we are actually connected to the game and if the product is not paused, right? Because otherwise, if you don't do that, the plugin, the loop will keep running, even if, let's say, you disconnected or you pressed pause, and obviously you don't want that. So we're going to add a simple condition here. If conditions, so it's in wmanager, wow, help us. And now we have, so we have a lot of options here. And we want in-game and connected and product started, not in pause. This one, for example. Okay? So if we are in-game and connected and the product is started and it's not in pause, we can do something. And what we will do is simply logging.write. For now, we're just going to say loop. It's going to loop extremely fast, right? So we want to, chill out a little. So what we will do here is thread dot sleep 1000 milliseconds, so that's 1 second. So this loop is going to execute every 1 second when we press play. The last thing we need to do is after is running equals true, call plugin loop. And that should be good. Now when we press play, we should see loop every second, and when we press stop, we should see PluginTutorial disposed. Let's see. I'm gonna rebuild. Go to wRobot, clear the log, press play. PluginTutorial initialize, loop, okay, it's looking good. Press stop, PluginTutorial disposed. Everything is working fine. So right now it's the most boring plugin you've ever seen, obviously. So let's make it a little more exciting and see if it actually works in action. So what we could do, for example, is try and detect the enemies around us. So what I'm going to do is in this loop, we're going to refresh this list every time and see what we have around us. So instead of just writing loop in the log, what we can do is create a new list of wow units. And let's call this attackable units equals. Now we're going to call the object manager. I think the object manager deserves a little talking because it's extremely important in the wRobot, ecosystem. The object manager can do a lot of things with all the objects that are present in the object manager. So basically, on most servers, the object manager can see all the objects in a 100 yards radius around you, which is usually more than enough. So here we want to call the object manager dot, and let's say get wow unit attackables. And there you go. So every second I'm going to check for all the attackables units in a 100 yards radius around me. And just for good measure, we're going to do no, you know what? I'm just going to log the amount of wow units. So there are oh, by the way, I misnamed that. Don't need an underscore. Dot count attackable units around us. Okay, let's give it a go. Rebuild. So I'm here. There's a few enemies around. So they're not hostile, but they are attackable. Press play. Whoops, don't fight. And there are 15 attackable units around us. And if I move around, probably this number is going to change. 16, 17. So depending on where I am, there's different amount of attackable units around me, obviously. So this seems to work, right? So this is a good example of how you build a plugin with a loop. So now let's make it a little more exciting, right? Let's try and draw on the radar a circle around these units. Let's see if we can do that. The radar is, in my opinion, extremely useful, especially for debugging. So I think that's a good thing to show here. The first step you need to do is to attach an event to the radar 3D. So let's do that. And we're going to do this in initialize, obviously. So here we can go radar 3D dot onDraw event plus equals. That's the shorthand to basically attach an event, to attach a listener to an event. And we're going to call the method that we will create later draw radar. Okay. Now that we have attached the event in initialize, we need to remove it in dispose. It's very important that we do that, right? We don't want to keep attaching listeners to events constantly every time we press stop and play. So we can copy this file, this line here, and instead of plus equals, we do minus equals. Very simple. So we attach and we remove here. And now we're going to create the draw radar method. So private void draw radar. Okay. And now we want to draw a circle around the attackable units, right? But we can't access this variable because it's in this scope. So we want to make it available to the entire class. So let's do that. Private list wow unit. And let's call it attackable units. And we're going to initialize it here. Okay, so we have this variable that's now accessible to the entire class. So instead of having it in this scope, we can just directly assign it here. And we can remove this message. We don't need that anymore. So every second, we're going to refresh the value of this list of attackable units. So now we can access it in draw radar, and we can iterate through it. So let's do this. So for each, oh, look at that, auto completion, baby. So for each wow unit in attackable units, we're gonna do radar 3D dot it's draw circle. So the center is gonna be the unit position. So unit dot position. The radius we're gonna say 1.5. It's a float. The color is gonna be color dot. Oh, it doesn't recognize it. So just type color like this. Put your mouse on, and the dependency is a system drawing. Okay, color.red. And you know what? Even for good measure, we're gonna trace a line. We're gonna draw a line from your character to all the units. So radar3D dot draw line from, again, we're calling the object manager, which contains you as a player, object managers dot me dot position to the unit position, unit dot position. And for the color, we're gonna go color dot red. And for the alpha, we're gonna tone it down a little. Let's say 100. Okay. There's one last thing you need to do here is after you attach the event, you need to call radar3D.pulse. Okay, let's see if it works. Rebuild. I'm gonna clear the log. Okay, it's all good. Let's see. As you can see, it works. So it's showing me on the radar all the units in a 100 yards radius around me, with a line going to them and a circle under them. Exactly what we wanted. Okay, so now we're gonna take a look at the settings. Let's say we want to give the user the option to turn the radar on or off. So the first thing we need to do is to create a new file. So right click, add, new item, and we're gonna call it tutorial plugin settings. Press enter, and there you go. You have your class. We're gonna make it public, and it has to inherit from settings, from robotmanager.helpful. Okay. So now I'm gonna show you, let's say, good boilerplate. This is not super interesting code, but I'm going to show you how to do it cleanly. So the first thing we want to do, and you will see later on why, is to create a variable, a read-only variable that contains the name of the product. So let's just do that. Private. It needs to be static because it will be required in a static method. So read-only string, let's say product name equals plugin tutorial. Okay. And now we're gonna set a variable, or should I say, no, it's not a variable, it's a property. It's a getter. It's gonna be static. It's a string, and it's get settings path. And what I want it to return is advisor file path and name, product name, and object manager. Need to import it. Object manager dot me dot name. This is gonna be the name of the settings file plus dot plus useful dot real name. Real name is the name of the server you're playing on. And then we're gonna create, it's not private, it's public, static again, tutorial plugin settings, and we're gonna call it current settings. Get set. So this is a little boilerplatey. I'm aware of that. It's not super interesting, but I mean, there's no point really in, diving super deep in that code. It's not very important. As long as it works, it's fine. So settings need a save and load method. So let's create those. So public bool save. Going to be a try catch. So saving, it's just going to return save and get setting path. With a catch in case there's an issue. We're going to go logging dot write debug or error as you wish. I'm going to go for error. And we're going to go product name and save. Plus the exception. I forgot to add exception X. There it is. Okay, was it red? Oh yeah, right. I need to return false here. Okay. Public. I'm gonna do the load method now. Honestly, this code that I'm doing right now, this project is gonna be on GitHub. I'm gonna put the link in the description. You can just straight up copy paste it. Maybe change just the name here of the product name, but the rest you can just copy and paste it. So public static bool load. So this is when we're loading the file. Again, that's try catch. Try. So if file dot file so if file.exist get setting path, current settings equals load. We want to make sure we cast it. Tutorial plugin settings get setting path. Return true. So if the file doesn't exist, current settings equals new tutorial setting plugins. Thank you, auto completion. So catch, same here, catch exception X. We can just copy paste it, can't we? Copy paste this, login, writer, product name, load, and return false. Okay, there's one last thing I believe. We need to create a constructor for the class. So little shorthand, you can type CTOR and tab twice, and there you go, it creates a constructor for you. And we're going to create, obviously, our first setting, which is going to be called enable radar, and it's going to be false. So that's the constructor that's initializing a variable that we have not yet created. So we're going to do this now. So public bool enable radar, and that's a property. Get set. By the way, there's a shorthand for property too. I can show it to you. If you just type prop, press tab twice. Okay. So bool, tab, enable radar, press enter, and that's it. It's a little faster. Okay, so that's the more interesting code, right? We're creating an actual setting. Now this property needs attributes to work properly. So let's create them. And I'm going to show you how to do this. So the first one will be default value. And it's going to be false because we want enable radar to be false by default. Second attribute is going to be category. So we're going to say settings. Then the display name is going to be enable radar. And finally, the description. And we can say something like shows the enemies around you. So this is the most important part of the code to understand, like how you set up actual settings for your plugin. So now we're not done, obviously, and we need to go back to main.cs. I'm going to close this. And on initialize, what we want to do first is to load the settings. So we call tutorial plugin settings.load. Okay. The next thing we need to do is to do something here because remember, it's required by iPlugin, and this code will be executed when you press the settings button in the plugins tab. So let's see what we can do in there. So first we're going to call tutorial set plugin settings.load, and then tutorial plugin settings dot current settings dot toForm. And this is a blocking thread. So when you open the settings of your plugin, it's going to create a new window, a form. And while the window is open, the code is still in there if you wish. It will only go to the next line when you close the window, and this is where we call tutorial plugin settings dot current settings dot save. So first you load the settings, then you create a form, then the user can change all the settings he wants in there, closes the window, and then this line is called. So you save the settings. Okay, so I believe we are done with the settings like that. So let's test it. I'm gonna build, open wRobot, go in the settings, click on PluginTutorial, and now click on this button. And it works. It created the window here, the form we talked about, with one setting in the category settings called enable radar, with the description shows the enemies around you, which defaulted to false. So that's good. Let's try turning it to true and close. Open it again. And it's still true. So that's good. And we can even check in your wRobot settings folder. Now you have to look for the file. So remember how we named the file. First, the name of the product, PluginTutorial. So Mary is the name of my character, and my server is called Trinity. It's my own server, so I didn't give it a specific name. So it's all good and it's working. Let's see if the file contains the right information. And indeed, we can see enable radar. That is true. So that's perfect. So now that the settings seems to be working, at least saving in the file correctly, let's use it in the plugin. So it's pretty simple and straightforward. So we want to disable the radar if the setting is false, right? So simply what we can do here is if tutorial plugin settings dot current settings dot. So this is static, so you can call it from anywhere in your project. Enable radar. So if enable radar is true, then we can just copy and paste this in there. So when you start the the product, if enable radar is true, we attach the event. And here, same thing basically. If the radar is enabled when we dispose, that means we have a radar listener that is attached to the event. We detach it. Okay, so I'm going to build, and we're going to try directly in the game. Okay, so let's double check. Right now the value is true. So let's press play. And as you can see, the radar is working. Okay, I'm going to stop now. I'm going to go back to the settings, turn it back to false, close it, press play. As you can see, no radar. And this is how you use the settings. So we've seen how to set up the project, we've seen how to make a plugin loop, and we've seen how we can set up the settings too. Now there's one last thing I want to talk about. I mentioned it at the start of the video, is how you react to events. So you can have both in your plugin. You can have both a loop and event listeners. So we're going to see how to do that. In this example, I want the plugin to click yes when I try to equip an item, and there's this, the pop-up that says it's going to bind it to you. So I want the plugin to automatically click yes for me. So let's try and do that. So first, what we need to do is to attach a listener to the game events. So events LUA with args, yeah, that's the one. Dot on events LUA string with args. That's the one we want. The other one is deprecated because it was using enums. It's not the case anymore. And we're gonna attach a method to it, and we're gonna call it plugin event handler. Doesn't really matter. You can call it whatever you want. And same as before, we attach an event when we initialize. We need to remove it when we dispose. So minus equals, plus equals, minus equals. Okay. And now we're going to create this method. So private void plugin event handler And there you go. We created the method, and it's still whining because it needs a specific signature for this listener. And if you're not sure about a signature when you do that, you can control click on the class here, events LUA with args. The one we're using is this one, events LUA string, and this is the signature that we need. So you copy this, close it, and paste the signature here. And there you go. Those are the parameters that you need for this listener. The reason is that every time an event is fired, you're going to catch it here, and each event has an ID, that's the event's name, as well as a list of arguments. And now you might be wondering, like, okay, that's fine, but how do I know which event I need to listen? Which event name do I need to catch? And this is where things get a little, I'd say, harder or interesting, depending on how you see it. For example, there's a website here I'm going to show you that lists all the events in the game. As you can see, there's a ton of them in all kinds of category. Basically anything, as I said, anything almost that happens in the game, you can catch an event for it. So the one we need for what we want to do is in item, and it's the first one. Well, that's easy, that's the first one. Auto equip, bind, confirm. So we're going to copy this. And now what we're going to do is if ID, event ID equals auto equip bind confirm, we can do something. Let's test it right now. So logging dot write. Let's just write this in the log if we catch this event, just to see if it works. Okay, so I'm going to build. Go back to the game. Kill a log. And start the plugin. Okay, so nothing's going on, so that's good. I'm gonna add an item to my bag. That's the gloves. And now I'm gonna try to equip it, right? By right-clicking on it. By right-click, and as you can see, in the log, it says auto-equip bind confirm. Okay, I'm gonna close this now. So that's good. It means that it works. It means that an event was fired, and we caught it in this method right here. So now all we need to do is to actually click the OK button in the World of Warcraft client. So right click and we can see this is the button we have to click on. But to click on this button, we need to know the name of this specific UI element. And there's one cool way to do it. So in the client, you press enter to show the chat here, and you type /fstack, fstack, and then you press enter. Okay, so now we have a new tooltip that appears. It's on the top left right now, and it shows you the stack, the UI stack. It's extremely useful. So we're going to go to put the cursor on the OK button. And as you can see on the top left in the tooltip, the topmost information is static popup 1 button 1. And that is the button we want to click on. So now we know the name of the button we need to click on. And we're going to do this using LUA. LUA is a language that is used in the game that users can use, and it's mostly for add-ons. But we are going to use it just to click on this button. And the way you call LUA from your C# code is like this. LUA dot LUA do string Now we have to write some LUA in there. So what we want to do is static popup one button one colon click. This LUA command will click on the button OK when we are auto binding. So the event fires, we catch it here. We detect that the event name is auto-equip bind confirm, and we immediately press static popup one. Let's give it a try. I'm rebuilding. So as you can see, I have no gloves equipped. Those are new gloves that I put in my bag. I'm gonna launch the bot. The plugin is running right now. And if I right click on the gloves, the plugin will click OK on the bind event immediately. So I'm gonna do this now. Boom. That was instant. So this was a way to show you how you can use LUA to complement your plugin. LUA documentation is pretty easy to find. I have this one here. I can put the link in the description or whatever. As you can see, there's a lot of function. You can do tons of stuff that you cannot necessarily do with the wRobot API. As for the events, I think this specific page is cross expansion. So, but most of them work for Lich King. You have to basically try and see what works or doesn't. And I would say that this is the hardest part of developing for wRobot. There's a big lack of documentation for the wRobot API, and it's not necessarily easy to find the right events or the right LUA functions that you're looking for. But once you get some knowledge with that, things get a little better, and you can do really crazy things. You can do basically anything you want with the game. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you some inspiration in the future to create maybe your own plugin and release it on the forums. Sorry for my English, it's not my native language. I still hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for listening.